Hello and welcome to the Wolves Report. This is episode 39. I'm Ryan Lester, and today I'm delighted to be joined by BBC WM's Mike Taylor, who's we've been trying to get on for a while, but he's a very busy man, is Mike. So delighted to have him on today. We've also got Nocky and Tyler, our two regular pundits. Today we're going to do our best to analyse the Southampton game. We're going to talk about the potential signing of Diego Costa, talk about games so far and the best defence in the Premier League. Well, Man City and Liverpool next. Taking your questions and looking ahead to Liverpool. I've got an hour for the show. The show is always recorded live. We try and get your interactions, your comments to make the show flow more. So let's start off by making the most of this hourly rate we have to pay Mike. Mike, take the time back to get your thoughts on the Southampton game.
Well, look, it's about winning first of all. So that they've won. It might not have been the prettiest or always the most free flowing, but you got to win games, especially when they haven't won one for ages. So regardless of how the game went, the most important thing is they won one, especially with the two games coming up. I'm sure there's more fluency that can come. There's always a whole load of things to improve, and they still don't look full of goals because although, as you quite rightly say, the best defence in the Premier League so far, and that's great, but also struggling to score goals. Again, a familiar problem. So, which is what I suspect we're going to spend most of this session talking about, and what more to the point, what they're trying to do about it. So, obviously a setback with Kalajdzic, and that's really sad, most of all for him. But the most important thing was to win a game.
Yeah, so I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm absolutely delighted. I'd have taken it anyway. I'd have taken 4-3, rubbish, anything. As you say, Mike, the most important thing was for Wolves to win that game. We did that. We got over the line. Was it convincing? Probably not. Was it a little bit fortunate because Che Adams decided to manage to get the worst open goal ever wrong? No, but it doesn't matter because we got a bit of luck and we got over the line. Nocky, following on from Mike? What's your take on the Southampton game?
No one cares, son. The only thing people care about today is Diego Costa. That's what they're tuning in for today.
We'll do that in a minute.
When does he log in?
I thought the game was exactly how I thought it would be, if I'm being totally honest. It was a game that they would have looked at, and although there would have been no obvious panic that we could see, they'd have known with the fixtures coming up that they really needed to win that. And the performance wasn't great, and we absolutely got away with one, but when you look at Spurs, we could have got something there. Maybe they got away with it. Leeds, maybe could have got something there. They got away with it. So sometimes it's just about winning a football match when you're in the position we're in. And it wasn't silky. It wasn't champagne football. But we got over the line and we absolutely had some luck on our side. I mean, the Che Adams one, I've never seen anything like that in my life. He doesn't even need to edit in. He can chest it in. He can bring it down.
He can literally hit any body part other than his hands and it's a goal. And somehow he's managed to miss it. But we'll take it. We'll absolutely take that.
You need that luck, though, don't you? You need that bit of luck when you've been, in the situation we're in and you haven't won a game and people are starting to talk about you're in a relegation battle. You just got to find a way to win a football match, and we did that. And we scored a decent goal and we won the game. So I'm absolutely delighted. I don't care how that first win came. It just needed to come.
Now it's time to bring a check of reality and a little drop of misery. Tyler, what's your take on the Southampton game?
Thank you.
Average performance, but the boys are dead right. All that mattered on Saturday was 3 points. Nothing else genuinely mattered. We hadn't won in the first 5, 2 tough games coming up. Same as you boys, we just needed to win. And they did, and it was nervy towards the end. I could barely watch the last sort of 5-10 minutes, to be honest. It was, squeaky bum time, wasn't it? But I think just to call out, you've said about the defence, the centre-backs were, colossal again, weren't they? Apart from the chance that Adams had, I don't remember them really being troubled. And I thought, while Neves was probably quiet for his standards, and that is against his normal standards, Núñez then stepped into that role and really drove Wolves forward. And nice to see him get an assist. And he looks like the player we've signed rather than, looking like Tony Dinning for his first 2 or 3 games. He's going to be you can just tell he's going to be a quality footballer, can't you? And it's nice now if Neves is slightly off form, there's now maybe 1 or 2 that can step in and sort of drive the team forward, where I think we've had such a reliance on Neves before. But yeah, the 2 centre-backs and Núñez for me were the standouts.
Just looking at the game, Wolves 51% possession, 7 shots, 2 on target, 4 off target. So not a lot of shots in comparison to other weeks. Southampton 12 shots, 1 on target, clear-cut chances. Wolves had 2 clear-cut chances, and Southampton obviously had 1 with the open goal. It's all right to read into the stats, Mike, and I mean, me and Tyler discussed.
Tell us the XG, Ryan. What's the XG?
Southampton slightly overperformed Wolves in the XG. That's because that was the most ridiculous open goal. But going back to what we all said at the start, Mike, this game was an absolute win, and you almost felt there was a little bit of nerves about the team to start off the game because, that's the way I felt, because going into Liverpool and Man City, you could be then winless after a good percentage of the season, and things look really difficult for the manager. So I felt like it was a really big step forwards potentially for Bruno and this team this season.
Yeah, I mean, look, the bottom, I think, of any league is sticky. It's magnetic. And, I mean, look at Leicester. I mean, Leicester, most people think they're a much better team than that, than where they are at the moment. But they'll be sweating until they win a couple of games to pull away from it. And we've all seen teams in the past that get into serious relegation trouble or end up going down, and you think, well, they're far too good to be there. And it's often teams that get off to a bad start, and it just hangs on them like a sort of concrete around the neck all the way through. So until you've started winning a game, especially with those 2 coming up, that's really important. I mean, look, the next 4 games, Liverpool, Manchester City, West Ham and Chelsea, Wolves might win a couple of those. Stranger things have happened.
Tyler will not like that, Mike.
Well,
No, I think you're right.
they could do. I mean, look, Liverpool are a bit all over the place by their stands at the moment. They could do. But at least Wolves are going into them, at least if they don't, because they are a difficult spell of games, at least they've got something on the board. And that really is above every other consideration, or almost every other consideration. You don't want a long-term injury in doing it. So, yeah, I'm sure the players were a bit nervous. I'm sure everybody was a bit nervous. It would be surprising if they weren't.
Yeah, I mean, as we say, it is literally just a result counts. You mentioned the fixtures coming up. But in terms of performances so far, I mean, I don't know if you guys agree with me here, but I don't recall Wolves playing poor this season. Yet I don't recall them playing well. Every performance has shown little signs, but it's felt a little bit mediocre. Now, if you've played mediocre and you've got the best defence in the Premier League, that's a real foundation, isn't it, Tyler?
It's stats, though, isn't it, Sam? We've got the best.
I love a stat.
We've got the best defence in the league, but the worst attack in the league. So it depends if your glasses are full or half empty, isn't it? And I think you know which mine it is. For me, it still boils down to the fact you can't average 1 goal every 2 games, which is what we're doing. That's not sustainable over the course of the season. They're obviously trying to change the way we play and, get on the front foot a bit more. So I'm sure with time, we had a text chat, didn't we? We both agreed he needs time now to implement what he wants to do. He's been backed, he's been given the money. But you can't keep not scoring goals. It's all right playing well like we did at Tottenham and for patches in other games. But if you don't score when you're on top, and especially for Wolves, you feel the nerves almost a little bit more, don't you? And I think that's critical. We don't create a lot of chances in open play. What did we have on Saturday? Neto drove 1 wide, the goal. Apart from that, I'm struggling really to think of much else. So it's all well and good saying we played well, we're good at the back, we are good at the back, and that's a real positive, but we can't keep the average goal ratio we've got, XG or not, Ryan, they've got to start going in, haven't they? So,
yeah, absolutely. And just moving on to that, one of the reasons we brought Sasa Kalajdzic in was to change that, to give us a pivot up front, someone to play off, someone that was a threat in the air. And Noki, that's, as debuts go, it doesn't get much worse than that, does it?
No, I mean, I think before we talk about him, I still think the setup's wrong. I don't think 4-3-3 suited us in that game. I thought we should have gone 4-2-3-1. I thought we were screaming out for Adama earlier than we got him. So I still think that's a major reason we're not scoring goals. I don't like the 4-3-3. I don't think it's effective for us. I think 4-2-3-1 gives us so much more in those attacking areas. But that's a different conversation. In terms of Kalajdzic, should I be surprised? You look at his injury record, it's not good reading, is it? So there was always a possibility this could happen. I'm sure there's been questions about his medical. I'm sure that medical was performed professionally. You don't spend that kind of money on a player if you haven't done all the correct due diligence on him. But he's obviously a player who's just very unlucky with injuries, and to do your cruciate at 45 minutes into your debut, but we do love a cruciate at this club, don't we? I mean, the history we've got for players doing their ACL is frightening. So it was disappointing. We didn't get a chance to really see him, see what he could do. And obviously, you suspect that's it for at least this season. Maybe we get an opportunity to see him next year, but it's disappointing. But I think there was perhaps an expectation that he wouldn't play every game this season because of his history with injuries. So I'm not sure we should be too surprised, although the severity of it is obviously disappointing.
Yeah, it's Mike. You can't plan for a cruciate injury of an injury that one of the worst injuries a footballer can have, because it can change their pace, their mobility. They're just, other than Johnny, that seems now to have found himself again. I can't really name many players that have come back from such injuries and come back the same player. It's desperately unfortunate. But question for you, Mike, on this is, with a player with such a bad injury record that was only 25, was that too much of a gamble from Wolves?
I'd be cautious on that. And I say that I'm not a physio or an expert in that sort of thing, but my logic would be, if he does the same injury, so if you've got a player and he keeps getting the same injury over and over again, then I think you've got a point. If a player just gets a succession of different injuries, he could just be an unlucky player. I mean, I don't know the details of Kalajdzic's injury record, but if this is the first time the cruciate thing or anything similar has happened to him, then I'm not sure that you can draw a line from his previous injury record. Although I take the point, and I'd certainly take more educated advice on that. There might be people with a physio background who know better than that. Every signing is a gamble, and that's that's both in the case of them finding form and settling, and with injuries. But the part of being prepared for the league is making sure that you have, within reason, enough contingency to cover that. Hopefully he will come back, and hopefully he will return and prove that he can score goals, because that's the difference at the moment. Wolves at the moment are a good footballing team, but they're not a very good football team by Premier League standards. In that a footballing team, I suggest to you, they've got skills and they move nicely and they look attractive and they this, that and the other. A football team wins matches. Good football teams win matches. And it's a bit of a philosophical difference, but it is a difference, I think.
Absolutely. Just jumping in with a point from Mark Cole, one of the founders with me on the first shows. Technology for ops and rehab is very much improved in the last 10 years. Just look at Johnny. Mark, UEFA B coach, former Chelsea coach, and podcaster on here. So,
that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely has improved. But I believe, Mike, this is his second cruciate injury. I don't know if it's the same leg. He also dislocated his shoulder and had other records, but I mean, I think the most important thing is, Mike, you've got to feel sorry for the player, because it's not his fault. As a lad in his mid-20s that's come to a new country, the most lucrative league in the world, to play against the best, and it's an absolute stinker. I mean, he's gone down just awkwardly. I don't know how they've managed to put him back on the pitch. I don't know how that's happened, I don't know how much you can tell without a scan, but with things like that, surely you can't take a risk. I'm desperately sad for him, because although he doesn't probably come across as the most silky footballer, he's very productive. He was 3 goals and 3 assists from the Bundesliga. He was a handful. He was good in the air. He'd given us something that we wouldn't have had before. So that partnering with Jimenez, we'll talk about potential costs in a bit, but you can see now why Wolves are going into that. But I want to wrap up on the Southampton game and try and find some positives. Now, we won. It was a clean sheet. From there, I'm thinking, but the one thing, the person that did stand out to me, Nocky, was Matheus Nunes. I thought that was a game from him. We're starting to see the real guy now. Now, and I know Bruno said in his press conferences, these guys need time. And in a way, he's right, because you can't just drop one guy in a team and expect him just to be the same player he was doing at Sporting, because new country, new teammates, new game, different pace, 40 million or not, it does take time to settle. I thought on Saturday, he looked the real deal. He was box to box. His passing was good. He was running with the ball. He seemed to look strong when he had the ball, and people bounced off him. So, your take on Nunes from Saturday, Nocky?
Yeah, we're always going to compare him to Neves, aren't we? Because they're similar positions. And when Neves came in, he did hit the ground running, albeit in a lower league. But yeah, he looks a phenomenal player to me. I think when we signed him, we were all in agreement that it was a no risk signing for us, because he's only going to get better, and his movement. And I think there hasn't been enough spoken about the assist for the goal as well, because he has a touch and has a quick look, and that's an inch perfect ball for Podence to finish. I mean, it's an absolutely outstanding cross, and he showed some real pace to get into that position as well. But he looks like the sort of player that when he's had a few more games and he really gets to grips with perhaps the speed and physicality of the league, he's going to dominate midfield. He's just got that look about him, someone who can see things, a bit like a kind of Cesc Fabregas, who knew what was going to happen 5 or 6 seconds before it happened, and he's got that about him for me. So I think with him and Neves, and then in your more difficult games, obviously there'll be the 3 with Moutinho, you can see that really, really being powerful in midfield. And if I'm looking at midfields at the moment, I don't see too many better than that, if I'm being honest. I think we've got some exceptional players in that area, and if we can get it right up front, you've got no doubts at all that those players are going to find them attacking lads in the right positions.
I mean, Tyler, in terms of technical ability, this is a dream midfield. We've never dreamt of having Moutinho, Neves and Núñez in the same team. The ability those 3 have is, I know it sounds ridiculous to say, but when we go to Liverpool on Saturday, the one area of the pitch that Wolves will be stronger will be in centre midfield. But do we need more contribution from the midfield in terms of the goals? Because it's all right saying the forwards aren't scoring, but we need more from. We're going to need goal. I mean, Núñez has come twice with headers. I think one volley's hit, one over the bar, it's closer at Spurs, a header. I think he did a half volley at Bournemouth that hit the bar. So he's getting in the positions. I think a goal will come from him, but we're going to need more from the midfield, aren't we?
Yeah, and he was noticeably closer to Sasa when he was on the pitch, wasn't he? First half, he was the one getting close to him, trying to play off him, get near him, get around him, which enables Neves to drop a little bit deeper and dictate it. I mean, I've said on here numerous times, I like Neves when he's everywhere. I like Neves when he's holding, and I like him when he pushes forward as well. So I think that there's a bit of work to do on that dynamic potentially. But yeah, he looks like he's got pretty much everything, doesn't he, to his game. There's not a lot missing, is there? One goal might bring 3 or 4 for him. The other positive I thought on Saturday was Johnny, actually. I thought he started the game with his boots on the wrong feet first half. He kept giving the ball away. He looked a bit shaky, but second half, Johnny was outstanding. He kept picking the ball up. He was driving forward. I've obviously bored Nocky senseless with what I'm talking about, so sorry, Nocky.
He's left the tap on, mate. That's all.
But I mentioned for Johnny, because I thought it would have been quite easy for him in that game to almost, shy away, keep it very simple. But second half, he was taking people on. He was driving forward. So he's someone else I'd like to give a shout out for, because he didn't start the game very well, but he finished it superbly. Yeah,
Johnny's bringing. The way he brought the ball forward in the second half, the confidence that he showed, he looked like the Johnny of old. But I just want to keep on Matheus Núñez for now, Mike. Wolves have finally got a midfielder that can travel with the ball. I mean, it's something we haven't seen at Molineux for, I can't remember I don't think you can put Gibbs White in that category because he's probably a little bit too high up the pitch. But in terms of a centre midfielder, I'd probably say Alfred Ndiaye, because when he got the ball, he could push and drive forward. I like Big Alf, and I'm surprised. I think he would have been a good squad man for the Premier League, going back quite a bit now. But he was the one player that you knew he could push the ball, bounce the player out the way, and drive forward. Now we've got Matheus Núñez doing that. Surely that's going to open up goals eventually from elsewhere.
Yeah, you need to have midfielders who are going to contribute in the penalty area. And in the last couple of seasons, Wolves have had 2 Rolls-Royce midfielders in Neves and Moutinho. But they have rarely been seen in the penalty area. And it's not to say that they haven't contributed to the team. Obviously, they've contributed to the team. But the number one need at the moment for Wolves is to find more ways of scoring goals. And actually, the only midfielder who's played consistently over recent years and been a presence in the penalty area on a regular basis, threatening to score or contribute to scoring a goal, has been Dendoncker. For all his many critics, there have been plenty of occasions where you're looking for someone to get onto a cross, and Dendoncker is at least trying to do that. And occasionally, not often enough, but occasionally he scored a goal. Neves, obviously, is prone now and then to pop one in from 25 yards, which is marvellous when it happens. Moutinho as well, less so. And obviously they contribute to the team in lots of other ways. But if Núñez is going to bring something different, that was the question for me about the signings. I don't doubt he's a huge talent and done very well in Portugal, all the rest of it. And that's all great. But what is he going to bring to the squad that they don't already have? And if you've just identified it, then that's a big plus.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I mean, some of the goals you've seen him score for Porto, he's getting one-on-one with the keeper. He's thumping them in. And I know it's a game like, for me, like Saturday, Liverpool are a fantastic team. Forget that they lost 4-1. They've still got a great forward line. He's a player for me that I think can, because of his mobility and the lack of mobility in the Liverpool midfield, for what he can do, I think there's a massive opportunity for him to shine on Saturday, and hopefully that's right. Just going back to your point, Tyler, regarding Johnny. I know Nocky was away then, but Johnny looked like the Johnny of old that second half. But unusually, Johnny was playing right back and had a really good game. Now, he's not a bad right back, but I think he's always looked more comfortable on the left. But this was me for the first time. He's on the right, he's cutting inside his man and he's driving forward. He really helped try and he was more playing like what E39 would do, because he's happy to cut inside and take the ball forward. But this was this was more Johnny. So yeah, it's a nice problem to have, isn't it? If Nelson Semedo's a sub, this is a nice problem to have.
Yeah, I've always preferred Johnny playing on the right. I think he played there last season and he scored a couple of good goals, one in particular against the Villa from that position. I think we lose a little bit when he plays the other side for me, because he's not confident on his left foot, so he'll always look to cut back inside. Yeah. And when you've got players with the pace that we've got ahead of him, you kind of lose that momentum when you're cutting back all the time. Whereas on the right-hand side, he's more natural and he'll naturally get the ball out of his feet and look to deliver. Behave. So it's about getting that kind of system in place where when we're going to play teams like Man City and Liverpool and Arsenal and teams like that, when we break, we're going to have to break with pace and we're going to have to get it right. And we can't be doing that if we're going to cut back inside. So I think he's far more effective on the right. In saying that, I think Nelson Semedo is one of our best players. Mm-hmm. So he's always going to start ahead of Johnny for me if Johnny starts in that position, which is going to be an issue.
Yeah, I totally agree. And to have a problem of Nelson Semedo, who I thought was fantastic last season after a bit of a rocky first season. I thought he came into his own last year and was fantastic. So if you've got a problem when you're stuck between Johnny and Semedo in the team, for me, I like them called their positive problems, aren't they? If you've got two right backs like that are fighting to get in, it's a place we've never been in before. So if they keep playing that well, then does it mean E39 going out of the team? But moving on to E39, I thought E39 had a great game on Saturday, Tyler.
I wouldn't say great. I thought it was good. I wouldn't say great. I think what Nocky's just hit the nail on the head when at the Bournemouth game, didn't he? Johnny was left wing back that night, and he noticeably slowed the attacks down. He noticeably had to check, turn inside, give it back. So I agree with Nocky. My jury's been out on E39 this season, but for me, I like the fullbacks to be in that natural position, and he was good. He did have a good game defensively and defensively. First half, got in some really good positions, put a couple of good balls across. Someone with Nocky, I like them on that natural side where they can push up, they can release the ball a little bit quicker, and they don't necessarily have to check, play it back like we saw Johnny do so frequently at Bournemouth. So, yeah, nice problem to have, isn't it? If a player like Nelson Semedo's on the bench and finding himself not on the side, it's only a good thing for the squad, isn't it, ultimately? You
raise a really good point then of having the fullbacks on their natural side. Most fullbacks now do play on the natural side, unless you're Dennis Irwin or Johnny. But having that natural flow to a team, it means then you can play with inverted wingers, because the inverted wingers, in theory, cut inside, create space for the fullbacks. And it's like, I know Liverpool started this a few years ago when they were just like gung-ho and the fullbacks were getting forward, and you've seen the emergence of Alexander-Arnold and Robertson and the brilliant attacking things that they do in the final third. So obviously we're not Liverpool and we're not quite that plan, but I can see the plan of what he's trying to do. We've got a win to build on, but obviously it's going to get a bit harder on Saturday. I haven't mentioned this on the credits going before, but I think this needs a mention ahead of two tough games. Max Kilman, Mike. I'm going to put all the boys in here are going to agree. I'll see if you as well. I'm struggling to name a better English centre back on the form that Max Kilman's shown at the moment.
Yeah, he's got a very good claim on it. I thought there was a point last season actually where he would have justified a call up. If it doesn't happen before the World Cup now, I think that's in a way understandable. It might be that Southgate is at the point where he's already sort of isolated. He wants for the World Cup and he would rather restrict it to them, because there's an international break soon, isn't there? So maybe it's a bit late for him to start looking at somebody completely new. So I think that's fair enough. So if he's not in the next squad before the World Cup, then I wouldn't necessarily man the barricades about that. But I don't think it's far away. And, on the current trend, he could establish himself as a regular international player for the foreseeable. And it's a lot to say, and he's still a young player, but he's clearly a consistent Premier League standard player. And once you're that, and you're England qualified, then you're automatically in the orbit of it.
Just to back there about him not being in the squad for the World Cup, Mike, one thing I would say is that the people that play left-hand side for England are Harry Maguire, dropped for Man United, and Tyrone Mings, dropped for Aston Villa. So there's now 2 substitutes who aren't playing, starting for their teams.
Oh.
So
look, I understand that, and I wouldn't have I don't have a problem at all with him. If he was selected for the England team and ended up going to the World Cup, I think that'd be great, and I'm sure he would do a perfectly good job. I'm just saying that given that Southgate hasn't had chance to bring him into the England setup, which in a way I suppose he's a bit like joining a new club, and you never know if players are going to work in different setups and different managers. I'm saying I can understand if it doesn't happen, but do I think he would justify his play? Absolutely.
Yeah, just a quick word from you two before we move away from that, and then talk about that Spanish and Brazilian gentleman that may be joining Wolverhampton Wanderers. I mean, I agree with everything Mike said, apart from the fact I think I'm at the stage now where on this form, if he's not in the squad, I would be banging on the door. I want to know why, because Southgate said at the start, which hasn't necessarily been true, he's picking players on form. And the 2 players who are keeping him out, Mings and Maguire, aren't getting in the team. So, okay, give me some reason behind Maximilian Kilman.
I think if it wasn't for the fact we had a World Cup in a couple of months, I think he'd be in the squad. But I think even though Maguire isn't a guaranteed starter and Tyrone Mings is the same, he will go with the players he trusts. And I think it kind of makes sense to me to do that, because that's the players that he's had so far. They're the players who've took him to a semi-final and a final of 2 major tournaments. So he's not going to upset that now at this stage, which is why I'd expect Cody to go as well instead of Kilman. But I think as soon as we get through that tournament, I think Kilman will be the next player to be called up for that. And although I think he's good enough to be in there now, I agree with what Mike said. It's not just picking a player, you're picking a personality as well. And he's got to be able to gel with that team. He's got to be able to become a part of that group who've been together for a long time, because that England setup hasn't really changed. So I think, players like maybe an Ivan Toney are going to have a similar situation where they just can't quite break him because of what's coming up in the next couple of months. So I completely agree. He should be in the England setup. And I think if the World Cup was at the end of this season, I think he would be. But the fact we're 2 months away, I can kind of see the thought process with Southgate.
Yeah, I agree with you. But equally, I'm all about form. And Ivan Toney, he scored a lob goal from outside the box, a chip goal from outside the box. He scored a free kick and another finish as well. So I think you pick players on form. But no, Tyler,
you say that they're right, but if Harry Kane hadn't scored a goal this season, are you starting the World Cup with Ivan Toney up front instead of Harry Kane? It's part of the decision-making process. But the 2 guys are spot on. You're not going to bring in a player that hasn't been anywhere near that setup just because they're having a good 3 or 4 games. There are certain people in the England squad, like it or not, are going to start for England. Pickford, Maguire, Kane, Mount. Chelsea fans are saying he's had a terrible start to the season, but Southgate rates him. They've never let Southgate down, so they're going to play, aren't they? And I totally agree with the 2 fellas.
Just finishing off on that point, Tyler, then. So let's say Man United continue on this run and Maguire doesn't play, only plays cup games. So as a player then that's not had 90 minutes until then, and the same with Mings, let's say Villa, he's kept out the Villa team. Are you telling me then you're going to take 2 guys who've been subs for half the season ahead of Kilman?
I think he will, yeah. I think Southgate will. Maguire's never let go of Southgate down once. Connor Cody hasn't. We all know Max Kilman is better than Connor Cody in his 2. But Cody's going to go, like Knocker says, because he's in around the dressing room. He's a big influence there. I agree with Mike. I think he'll definitely be integrated into that squad after the tournament.
Yeah.
From all I hear, by the way, I think Kilman will fit into that setup if it's still Southgate for the long run. I don't think he's quite necessarily the same character as Cody is, although he's very much been sort of brought through under Cody's wing by the sound of it. So I'm sure he will fit in absolutely. And if he's called upon by Southgate, I'm sure he'll do a good job. But I just think the way of things is that, by the time you get this close to a tournament, and of course it's unusual to have it mid-season, I would imagine that Southgate, having been in position for so long, and as you were just saying, as his squad largely together for a while, that he's going to stick with it. But it's not that Kilman wouldn't do well in that squad. I'm sure he would. But he would have to acclimatise to it. You know, however well he's playing, he would have to acclimatise to a new level and a new setup and a different challenge as well. So it's not just from the manager's point of view; it's also from the players.
I don't think it's just.
I totally agree. Sorry, I was going to say, I totally agree with you, Ryan. I put a tweet on after the game. I can't currently name a better English centre-back than him on form. I genuinely can't. And there was an occasion in the game where we did sort of make a mistake, and the Southampton guy had like 3 or 4 yards on him, and he just sort of steamed past him, shrugged him off the ball, and I was like, where's that turn of pace come from? He's got everything to succeed.
He's deceptively quick, Max. He's not quick off. He's tall. He's
not
quick off. He's not quick off the mark. But when he opens them legs up, he just seems to get alongside you. And
it's like me when he gets going.
Crikey, 500 metres down the hill.
This isn't something that just happens at. This doesn't just happen at international level, though, does it? I mean, you look at the start of the season. For me, arguably our best attacking player was Podence. He obviously trusts Neto more because as soon as it started not panning out the way he wanted to, Podence is out of the team and Neto's playing without really making an impact on games. So managers will always play players that they trust in those positions, and Southgate can only go by previous tournaments and previous experiences with his lads, and he's going to stick with what he knows.
I get the theory, and I just disagree. I absolutely disagree. If you're a sub for your club and you're not playing, but you're playing for England, I get what you're all saying in terms of the integration and being part of the squad and getting the way it works things. I get that, and you're totally right. I just don't see how you can be playing ahead of somebody if you're a sub for a team that isn't great. I just struggle to process that.
Yeah, I think Mings probably will now play the majority of games for Villa with Carlos injured. I mean, we can have whether Mings and Coleman are a better long-term bet is a different debate. But you know, we'll see. I mean, you know, occasionally there is room for a player in a squad for a big tournament who hasn't played before, and he might be Kilman. He could go. I mean, absolutely, he could go. But I think, you know, if the World Cup was 18 months away, then I think I would expect him to be into the next squad. I'm just saying I can understand.
Absolutely. I agree. And Mike, you're far more logical than I'll probably ever be, and I completely accept what you're saying. I just don't like it. It just frustrates me. Right then, we're on to the part of the show. It's Diego, not Diogo, as Tyler said. 216 games for Atletico Madrid, 83 goals, 36 assists. 120 games for Chelsea, 59 goals, 23 assists. How many Premier League red cards? 0. Anyway, that was before VAR. Let's talk about Diego Costa. Nocky, you're chomping at the bit. We can't say that word earlier in the door for a family show, but he's a something house, but he's that something house that Wolverhampton Wanderers need. Some people are saying it's desperate. I am absolutely all for it. Nocky, the floor is yours.
I don't even care if he's complete pants when he turns into it. I still just want to see him in a Wolves shirt. He's horrible. He's nasty. He's aggressive. He winds people up.
That's enough about Mike Taylor.
But
what I'm here for.
We are far too nice, and someone like that instantly will terrify your opponents. I mean, if you were to say to Van Dijk on Saturday, would you rather face Raul Jimenez or Diego Costa? He's going to pick Raul Jimenez, even though there's much more chance of Jimenez scoring, because he knows he's going to come out with bruises, he's going to come out with a flea in his ear, and he's going to struggle. And I don't think he's desperate at all. I think it's a really smart move by the club, because he's not going to be the Costa at Chelsea. He's not going to come in and bang 20-odd goals in for us. But what he will do, he'll give you 15, 20 minutes here and there of utter carnage. And if you're losing a game, you bring him on, you partner him up front, and you just let him run wild, and things will drop, because you've got that almost a Traore factor with him where people are scared of what he's going to do. So instantly you're backing off 5 yards and your whole defence will drop. You'll get that with Costa as well, because he hasn't got the mobility to pull out to the wings. He hasn't got the mobility to drop back into midfield. He'll be exactly where we need him to be, which is in the centre of a 3, picking up what's available to him. And Jimenez will still be number 1. There's no question about that. He'll still be our starter. But what an option to bring on from the bench that would be. And he'll ruffle feathers, and the fans will absolutely love him. And I think if we get this one over the line, he's got cult hero written all over him, hasn't he? Because he's just got that element about him that you just really want to see him. You hate playing against him. You'd absolutely love to have him in your team, wouldn't you? So I'm all for it.
Really?
That's on the fence, son. That's on the fence.
It's no risk, isn't it? I mean, you're talking a 12-month deal. People talk about his wages. We're an established Premier League club making 120 odd million a year. It's not, you're not talking about bankrupting your club on the back of this. You're talking about bringing a player in who hopefully does a job for you for a few months. And if it's him or Andy Carroll, I'm 100% on board with bringing Costa in, no doubt about it.
So, Mike, we're talking about 2 times Premier League winner, 2 times Spanish champion, Europa League winner, 3 times Europa Super Cup, Spanish League winner, English League Cup, Brazilian FA Cup, and Brazilian League champion, Diego Costa. I think we're all excited, Mike.
Yeah, but I was tickled by the way when you introduced him before. You made it sound like Wolves were signing John McGinley. If we'd have been doing this game, this recording 30 years ago,
that word is banned on here, Mike.
We didn't like him when he was playing against us, and now if we could sign him, you'd have. Well, it's the same question. Would you have, if John McGinley had come up, say 30 years ago at the time, would you have signed, after the player that you love to hate? Do you know what I mean? Anyway,
the elbow to Steve Ball that written him off.
Yeah, well, I know.
Mike, now you've ruined it all.
You've started him again, Mike.
Is he desperate?
He should have gone that day, Mike. He absolutely.
Oh, desperate.
Disgrace.
Nothing if not topical. Anyway, is he desperate? Yes, of course it is. Does that make it bad? No. It's definitely it's a punt that he's worth taking. If it's a deal that they can do, it's going to be costly. It's not a cheap bet, presumably. It's going to be an expensive bet, and it might not work, but it might do the job for now. There's a longer term question which you can ask is, and I was asking this on WM last night and a piece for the BBC Sport website yesterday, which is how can it be that Wolves? I think everybody agreed last week Wolves had a brilliant transfer window. I saw some people saying the best they've had since they got into the Premier League, and after one injury, not a whole host of them, one injury, they're flying a bloke who hasn't played for 2 seasons in a top European club and hasn't been wanted by a top European club in the last 4 transfer windows, notwithstanding the record you've just listed. They're flying him halfway around the world, getting a work permit on appeal in the hope that he'll sign as a free agent after one injury. Actually, they did have a good transfer window, but clearly their need is very acute, and everybody now knows that Wolves feel like they're desperate, which is going to make buying a player in the next window an expensive experience. But you are where you are. And if you can get him in, and if only the effect he does is the effect he has on Nocky, if he has the same effect as that on all the players, then...
You just ruined it for me now, Mike. I want him straight back. He's finished.
Then even before he's kicked a ball or anything else, then he's worth the money, you might think. So why not?
Absolutely. Tyler, I mean, we're all excited about this. I'm not expecting him to be pressing. I'm not expecting him to run in the channels. I want him somewhere between the centre spot and the penalty spot. That's where I want him. Stay in your lane, hold the ball up. If something goes in the box, I'm sure he'll be putting his body on it. And the excitement from the fan base is understandable. We're talking about a cult hero, we're talking about a serial winner, a player that plays on the edge. I mean, sometimes he goes over the edge, but I don't think this will do anything but lift the dressing room and the fan base, because we're talking about a legend of the game who has won it all, potentially coming to Wolverhampton Wanderers.
Yeah, I think Nock is very exciting. I think Mike does bring a sense of realism to the situation. I think I'm somewhere in the middle, but I am more tipping towards Nocky. I don't really see how it can be a negative. If you can get, like Knocker says, 20, 30 minutes, the odd start out of him here and there, I don't see how someone with that personality, that character of raising standards and being the best, and I've seen articles where he's talking about telling players that we're going to war, that, put his body on the line. I don't see how that can be a bad thing. And maybe I'm being a bit, blinkered by it because I'm as excited as you guys, but I just don't see how. I've seen Wolves fans say they don't want him anywhere near the club. They don't want him to. I'm just like, I just don't understand. It's exactly what we need from a spiteful, nasty perspective. I think we said, was it a couple of weeks ago on here, how nice we are, how friendly we are. We, get the opponent with nice Wolves. He's not nice. He's everything you want in your team. And if you were going to war, you'd want him on your team, not your opponents, wouldn't you? So
certainly wouldn't want to be fighting against him.
Yeah, I see it same as you, Ryan. If he can find a way, and if Bruno can find a way of implementing him between the centre circle and the penalty box, being the focal point, being physical, letting Podence, Neto, Guedes, Nunes just play off him and play around him, I think it's a pretty low gamble, to be honest. And yeah, same as you boys, I'm all for it.
Could you imagine it's 0-0 or it's 1-1? You've got 15 to go, he warms up and you see him coming on. What's the away end or Molineux going to be like? The lift that's going to give the place. And that's the buzz of seeing this guy with his perfect beard and his angry face, 6'2", 14 and a half stone, big boy ready for war. I don't care if you can't.
As long as he's fit enough. As long as he is fit enough to have some sort of realistic impact, and I do think there is some sort of impact with him just as a presence, and you've just articulated that very well, all of you. In that, and if he raises the morale and the spirits and the atmosphere, then that has a value in itself, which I think is not to be underestimated. But assuming he can be fitted, and Wolves must think he is, because I know they're bringing him in for a medical. You wouldn't go to all this bother if. They must have some intelligence that suggests that there's at least somewhere near. It is a drawback that he hasn't played in such a long time, and you can't help but wonder why that is, because it is unusual. We're not talking about a player who, as far as we know, has had a really serious injury, and we're not talking about a player who is 40. So it is a puzzle, but if he's fit enough to do something, then from the position that Wolves are currently in, it is a reasonable, if probably, I suspect, quite an expensive bet.
But you said it earlier, Ryan, he's a serial winner. I mean, I don't think you win the trophies he's won without having that level of professionalism about what you do. And he's not just someone who's coming in here to learn his trade. He's a goal scorer. I mean, he's not going to get the kind of numbers that he got at Chelsea. We all know that. But the comment, we're going to war. This is a guy who wins trophies. He wins competitions, he wins when he plays, and that's what he's here to do. And I don't think you're ever going to lose that as a professional. And yes, you're right, Mike, he hasn't played for a couple of years, but you don't find too many people he's played with, and any of them have got a bad thing to say about him, because he is a professional when he plays. He just knows how to get under people's skin. So
he must think he's fit enough to want to do it.
He's not going to make himself look silly.
No, exactly, because there would be a danger of signing a bloke who is so off the pace, whoever it is, who is so off the pace that he would look silly.
And he's not.
The club would look silly, and he's not going to want to do that. So
he's not struggling for money, is he? I mean, he's played for Chelsea. He's played for some of the biggest teams in Europe. So he's not coming for a last payday. For me, this is a guy who still thinks he's got something to prove, because everywhere you hear, people are telling him he's finished. They're not. I think a player like that, I think that'll get under your skin a little bit. And I still think he's got something to prove in this division.
The one thing that excites me about him, I don't know we're missing goals. But as you say, Tyler, all the butterflies around the box, Podence, Neto, Guedes, these players with the skills that have the ability, for me, when they get in goal-scoring positions, this is someone to feed off. This is a proper battering ram that even if he's not going to do anything, the defenders think he might do. You don't know what's going to happen. And what I really like, even at his best goal-scoring days, his assists for a centre-forward are very high. That's what I want. That bit, if you're in the box using the body, you're never going to lose that bit. You don't need to be quick to hold the ball up and lay it off. If he can get in the positions to feed Podence, I even say feeding Nunes bursting from midfield, if he's going to feed out, nor if he's getting forward. That battering ram for late on in a game, whether we're seeing it through or trying to get a goal, I can only see it as a positive. I've seen reports of 100 grand. I've seen reports of 175. Regardless, for a year, it is a lot of money, Mike, but it's a free transfer. And for me, it's a gamble worth taking. Just if it's just lifting the Wolves Report podcast, you know what I mean? It's done that already.
I think from the position Wolves are in, it is certainly a gamble worth taking. I think it would be responsible for Wolves to look in the longer term and say, look, this may work. Look, he may come in and score 6 goals before Christmas. Everybody that was genius. But you wouldn't want to be in this situation. Wolves are not in this situation by choice. If Kalajdzic doesn't get injured, are they still doing this? Maybe they still do. I don't know. But this isn't ideal. It might work, but this isn't an ideal situation to be in. But that's a slightly different debate. It's great to be excited, and look, it'd be fascinating if he comes in and if he's there at Anfield on Saturday and the game is still in the balance and he comes on. That's going to be really exciting.
Don't do that. Look at
And I described it on the BBC website yesterday as this most sort of cinematic of footballers. He is the sort of footballer that you could imagine somebody making a film about one day with the career.
I can't even think now.
So, and players like that, they get into situations of drama. It's about drama, and he could, by all his previous reputation, he could bring that for Wolves. So that's all great, but there is a longer term thing to look at, which I think the club will have to look at and say, how are we getting in this position? Because they're a little bit. Look, I'm sure Diego Costa wants to play and wants to prove himself from that point of view, but they are in a situation when we get to January where they can almost be held to ransom by people now, because everybody knows that Wolves still, for all the good work they did in the summer, are still one injury away from a crisis. And no Premier League club wants to be in that situation.
Let's hope, and I say this is more out of hope than believing it now, because I do believe this player's past his best, but I'd love Jimenez to fit in. But I mean, he really worried me at Bournemouth, Mike. He looked a shadow of himself, and I'm reluctant to give him hard criticism because of what he's been through. But at some point, you have to acknowledge that this might not be working out anymore. I mean, it's a real shame. It looks hard. When he scored in the cup game, I thought, here we go. He's off the mark now. I hope we have a little bit more of this. But he had such a limited impact on the Bournemouth game, Tyler. It's a worry, isn't it?
Yeah, how much I live in, but that was the game where you start to think, it was. We all said it, didn't we, after the game? That's not Jimenez, was it? He buries that chance he has. The header as well, he put wide. He buries that normally. So that was two chances he's normally burying. And then there is a bit of uncertainty about what happened on Saturday, isn't there? Some of the people are saying it's an injury. Then Bruno came out and said it's extreme fatigue.
Yeah,
I mean, we're 3 or 4 games into the new season, so it can't really be extreme. I just think there's something not right there ultimately. And Mike's right; it's a desperate position to be in. How are we in this situation again? Talking about not having a centre forward. We've had that conversation with 2.5 years. So
let's bring this question from Paul Nichols in on the same subject. Do you feel with the Sasha injury, Raul not himself, and now seemingly scratching around for a striker, does it go down to failure for the recruit team? Good window, otherwise, Nocky?
I think it does. I mean, you could see the short-term plan now would be Costa for 12 months, Fabio comes back, Sasha hopefully fit enough to start next season, and then you've got your 2 strikers, and then hopefully a third comes in if Raul comes out of the picture. But yeah, I mean, we've not scored goals for 3 or 4 years, have we, for being completely honest? It's not been something that we've ever really addressed since the injury to Raul. We've just not been able to put the ball in the box. So as much as improving the defensive element was important and improving the midfield was important, the key for me was a striker. Now, they obviously identified Sasa as a player that would do that job for us. I still think if we were going to loan Fabio out, we needed 2. Because I think this was always likely to be Jimenez's last season at Wolves. So I wanted us to bring 2 in. So I do think it's a failure in that sense. It's hard to criticise the window because it has been a phenomenal window. And I had to eat humble pie because I thought it'd be a complete disaster. But we have really probably cost ourselves maybe another 5 or 6 points as a result of not getting that striker over the line before the season started, and then bringing one in with a history of injuries as well. As definitely, you've got to look at that as a failure. There's no other way around it. Yeah,
your take on that, Tyler?
Yeah, he's articulated it better than I would have done. I'd say it's been a good window. You can't say it's been a phenomenal window. Going in, like Mike says, going into it, desperately trying to sign. I know we're all excited, but look at the fact: someone that hasn't played in a top league for 2 years, hasn't played since January. That's not a phenomenal window, is it? If you're trying to get that guy in, no other Premier League team's trying to do it, but we are. Some of the players we've signed have the potential to be phenomenal for us. But if you're rating the window now, it's probably 7 out of 10 because you can't go into another season without an established centre forward.
It's amazing how one injury can change the whole outlook. I mean,
which is what Mike said. Yeah, Mike.
If they were doing this, if they had 6 injuries, then this would be understandable. But it's 1. I mean, it's a serious injury, but you could have a serious injury it could happen to any player at any time.
Now, here's something that a lot of people disagree with. And I'm 50-50. Now that Costa is more or less over the line, why not sign Carroll as well? That's a hell of a plan B, aiming high crosses at Costa and Carroll. I mean, if you're a centre-back and there's crosses coming in against those two, I'm not going to want to be defending that. Now, obviously, Carroll played for Albion last year in the Championship, and I'm guessing that's why people don't want to be associated with him. Would I object to Andy Carroll coming? No. Do I think he'd get very many minutes? No. I think if you're having one player a lot, I think it's one or the other, isn't it? I mean, we're definitely going to get the one that we want by the sounds of things. I don't dislike Andy Carroll. If quality balls are coming in the box for Andy Carroll, there aren't much better around than what he does in terms of being a presence in the box. He's just not very mobile anymore, but you could say that about Costa as well. So if that was
those two profiles have never been mobile. They don't need to be mobile to get the best out of their game. Andy Carroll battered, I know years ago, but battered us at Molyneux years ago when he was in
the Newcastle game. Yeah, he was fantastic.
He wasn't mobile then. He just knew how to play his position and play the game. I'm not saying I'd sign him. Wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But you're right, Ryan. They don't need to be mobile. They just need to be active in and around the penalty area. That's all they need to do. I
mean, Mike, if it didn't happen with Costa, which is going to make this a very sad place if we don't now, because we're so excited about it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to turn my nose up at Andy Carroll because he's played for Albion in the Championship. I don't think we can, because if fit and required to do something at a certain point in the game, he does a job of something no one else can do in our team.
There's a lot of people think Andy Carroll did pretty well at Albion last season.
I think he did,
and actually outperformed Albion fans' expectations, I think it's fair to say. So yeah, he wouldn't be again from the position Wolves are currently in. Would it make them better than they are at this moment before the Costa signing? Yes, it would. Is it an ideal situation to be in? Neither of these these possibles, Costa or Carroll. The thing that really stands out, that Wolves are having to act in a way they don't want to, is that they are so far away from the profile of the sort of player that Wolves have been signing for the last 2 or 3 years. Wolves have been looking to sign, with justification, players who are early in their careers, who have not yet reached their peak. And that's in every position they've sought to do that. And they've done it in a number of cases very well. And probably they are signing players on the upward curve. Sometimes then they come in and then they move on, like Diogo Jota has, and maybe others will. We all thought Ruben Neves was going to, but still hasn't. Costa it doesn't fit that category at all. Andy Carroll doesn't fit that category at all. So it's out of character. You know, Kalajdzic does, if it wasn't for him being injured. He's a player you'd think, well, if he wasn't for that injury, his value could appreciate. So that's really a telltale as to how Wolves are having to act in a way that they wouldn't want to. But Carroll would make them better than they are right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I can understand why people turn their nose up, because you don't really want people that have played for your rivals. That's just a football traditional thing. But my love for Wolves is far more important than my dislike for any local rival. So if he's played for Albion or not, and he comes and does a job at Wolves, that'd be fine for me. However, I want Costa. Just moving back onto the Costa thing, Nocky. Not just what he can offer potentially in terms of his hold-up play, and wind the fans and wind opposing fans up and wind defenders up and just make things happen and make us sick a bit. This is a signing that raises the profile of Wolverhampton Wanderers across the world as well. Again, it's a player of that size. It's always been talked about on Sky Sports. It's been all over the place, been in the newspapers. So in terms of the marketing side of Wolves, and I know we don't always necessarily like talking about this, but this would be a massive, massive flag waving for Wolverhampton Wanderers, wouldn't it?
Yeah, completely agree. And we know how much scope the club put into marketing and the foreign brand and pushing Wolves as a brand generally. So, yeah, I just think it's no risk. I really do, whether it works or not. With the Andy Carroll situation, I'd have no issue with him coming in based on the fact he played for the Albion. My concern would be his injury record. Are we swapping one injured player for another one who's going to be injured 2 or 3 games down the line? But if we didn't get Costa and Carroll was the option, then I'd bring him in without that level of excitement, I think. But Costa's a player that everybody knows. I mean, the Chelsea fans are as excited as the Wolves fans are about the prospect of him coming back to the Premier League. So you can see just by anything on social media, sort of your different gambling agencies, your different Premier League supporters.
I mean, some of the videos and memes have been outstanding. Fantastic. It is like
But that's what was going to go through defenders' heads, isn't it? You know, they're going to look at him and think, "Oh Christ, Costa's coming on," and there's gonna. And if ever we get to Anfield and we're 0-0 and we've got 15 minutes left and he comes on, you'll see Anfield deflate. You'll see physically deflate because I think we know what's coming here, and that's what he brings to a club like us. That's what he brings when he comes on the pitch. So, yeah, it is going to cost us money if we can afford it, which we know we can. I don't see any kind of risk behind it.
Absolutely,
because VAR is going to be horrendous for him with some of his dark arts.
Absolutely. We're 55 minutes into the show, the Wolves Report, episode 39, with BBC WM's Mike Taylor, Mark Knott, Chris Stark, and myself, Ryan Lester. Thank you for watching so far. Thank you for your comments. We try and get as many as we can. And thank you for your questions that we've put up so far that we've taken off Twitter. Let's move on now to the final bit of the show, looking ahead to Liverpool. Now, we all watched the game last night. We saw Liverpool's vulnerabilities. We saw some players that didn't look like they're particularly bothered. But equally, this is a team that dispatched Bournemouth 9-0 when Wolves probably had 2 or 3 chances when Liverpool absolutely battered them. So I am going to use it as a bit of positivity, but I'm not going to get carried away. There's still some world-class players in a team that's won the Champions League and the Premier League recently. So have Wolves got a chance, Mike? Yes, they have. But it's hard though, isn't it?
Yes, and you have to score the first goal. If Liverpool score the first goal, it's really hard. But Liverpool are not right at the moment. And the pressure and the attention, well, most of the attention is going to be on Liverpool, depending on what's happening in the medical at the moment. There was a bit more attention on Wolves than there might otherwise have been. But actually, most of the world will be looking at Liverpool and saying, what's wrong with Liverpool? So that's a better time. It's better to be going there than with Liverpool in the form they were for most of last season, for example. But of course, it's still going to be difficult. But you have to not concede an early goal. Concede an early goal, you've got a real problem.
I mean, we talked on the group chat last night, Nocky, Tyler. We talked about it, and I look at social media. There's a general. I mean, even Klopp was talking about Wolves. He mentioned Wolves twice in his post-game interview, thinking they must be laughing at us now. They must think it's a great time to play us. So I don't know if that's him playing his mind games, which he's very good at, and planting seeds. I don't know, but I'd rather play them now than after the thumped Bournemouth 9-0, Nocky.
Yeah, I think the right team selection. I think Wolves can win the game, and I've looked at players like
Tyler's face.
He was always going to say, but they've beaten us every time they've played us since we've been back, haven't they? So you can't say we're not due. But I just think you look at them, and defensively, I think there's a weakness there. I don't ever think that Alexander's been a particularly good defender. I think he's very good going forward. Some of the goals they conceded yesterday were absolutely laughable, and I think if we get that selection right, then I think we can go there and get something. And I agree with Mike. If they score the first goal, we're not going to come back, are we? Because we haven't got a comeback in us, I don't think, especially against a team like that. But I don't know. I've just got a little sneaky that Wolves are going to go there and get something. There's no science behind it. I mean, we've just
Tyler's face.
It's because we've beat Southampton. I feel like we can set the world on again now. But I don't know. There's a little part of me that thinks that we're going to go there and an early goal. We can get a goal in the first 15 minutes. Anfield's always a quiet place anyway, so if we get that goal in the first 15 minutes, you'll feel the tension mount on the home supporters. And you felt it last year. We went a goal up with Neto inside the first sort of 2 or 3 minutes, and it turned into a cup game for the next sort of 60 odd minutes. So I think an early goal in the first 15 minutes. No, I've just got a feeling Wolves can get something.
Tyler,
we're going to lose.
He needs to put the shandies down, doesn't he?
It's Costa, so he's got excited.
You put on the group, I'm going to call you out. You said we're going to be 2-0 up early doors. I mean, we've scored 3 goals all season, and now we're going to score 2 in 10 minutes.
That was yesterday, mate.
I certainly think we'll be competitive, and I certainly think we'll give them a game, and I think we're a good side on our day. And I'm with you, boys. I think if he makes the right team selection, we have got a chance. I'd like to see some pace in the side.
What is your team selection then, mate? What is your team selection?
I do bring Samaida back in just for his pace and his cover at full back, to be honest. So I'll probably take Johnny out. The back four, the keeper. I'd probably go the 3 midfield again because you probably have to.
I think we have to do that, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm just shoving Adama up top. It might be stupid, but I'm shoving him up top because they play at such a high line. It's ridiculous. They always give you chances in behind. And then probably maybe Podence and Neto again. I think I'll just bring Adama in as up front, to be honest. And give them something to think about on the half turn and on the spin.
I mean, I dropped a tweet out last night, and then some people didn't like me talking about Adama, but there is an obvious vulnerability in behind Liverpool's fullbacks. If you can find that diagonal ball in behind there, Villa did it 2 years ago and put 7 past them. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be like that because that was a freak game, but Villa genuinely took them apart. They found a method in behind Alexander-Arnold and Robertson again and again and again, and that's there. Them opportunities are there because they don't track back there because they're that high up. There is a chance. Now, going forward, Liverpool are world class. However, Wolves are probably better than them in one area, and the area is midfield. And if that midfield can find the passes in behind, Wolves have got a chance. It's not a big chance, but it's a bigger chance than I thought it was. Mike?
Yeah, I think, it'll be an uncertain time for Liverpool before going into the game. And if Wolves start well, then they can cause a problem. And you've just talked about some of the ways in which they can do it. Wolves scored an early goal at Anfield the end of last season. All right, they ended up being sort of swept away in the tide, but if the same happened this time, it's a very different circumstance. So, Wolves can do it. They've played well at Anfield before, and they shouldn't fear it from that point of view.
Absolutely. We're at that time of the show then, boys, when we're going to do our predictions. Now, I'm going to start off with Tyler and work my way around. Tyler, tell us what's going to happen at Anfield. Give us your score and first goal scorer, please.
Well, firstly, do we get any credit for the right prediction for the Southampton game?
Yeah, you've won a thank you from Mike Taylor. Mike?
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
There you go.
That's better than any prize I could have imagined. I do want to be positive, but the best teams in the world react. They always react, and I think they'll react, and I think probably 2-0 to Liverpool. Sorry.
Nocky, let's go with you.
Right, I'm going to start roll through the middle. I'm dropping Neto for Adama, and I'm going to go 2-0 Wolves, Adama with the opener.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. You know what? We'll take that, mate. We'll print that on it. We'll get T-shirts printed with that on if you're correct.
We'll be 2 hours 15 minutes as well.
Mike Taylor, your team tweaks, your first goal scorer and correct score, please.
I should take the odds on that. I mean, there's certainly a way that Wolves can win, and they certainly don't go without a chance. The most likely result is I think that Liverpool win 2-0. I think there is a case for playing Traore, but I suspect it will probably be Podence. Yeah. As you know, in a three, maybe Podence playing in the centre, but I think there's a case for playing Traore, and you would imagine that Diego Costa, if he's passes his medical today, will be there in some form. So I do think Wolves have a chance, and I think the longer they hang on in the game, the greater their chance of winning. But I think you'd have to imagine the most likely result, as it usually is when anybody plays Liverpool or Manchester City, is that they win. So I think you'd have to expect that they will.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to level the score up at 2-2, and I'm going to go for a Wolves result as well, because it's my job to balance the books. I can't host the show and say we're going to lose, although deep down I actually believe that we are. However, Knocker's optimism has been incredibly infectious, and I am lapping that up. So, Nocky, I'm going to go 4-3-3. I think he'll keep the back four the same because they did well last week. The midfield in the three will be the same. I think Nunez, his job will be to support and break quickly. I think Podence will be in a false nine, a little bit close to the midfield to pick up and turn. And then it'll be Neto on the right and Guedes on the left so they can cut and inverted. And I'm going to go for a 1-0 Wolves win. Daniel Podence with his third goal of the season. This has been episode 39 of the Wolves Report. If Liquid Gold had a voice, it would sound like Mike Taylor. Thank you to Mike Taylor for joining us with the show. Thank you to Nocky. Thank you to Tyler. This has been episode 39 of the Wolves Report. You can catch us on YouTube, Twitter and Facebook of the Wolves.